All right, welcome to the All UV cast, and this one is a nicely spontaneous pop-up episode that wasn't planned by any means, but Lewis and I have been going back and forth on the Super League. We've been going on back and forth on it for a while since, well, I guess yesterday when the news broke,
Yeah.
and everybody forgot that we had played a match, and I think emotions were still pretty high when the news broke out because we were still reeling for the one from the 1-0 defeat to Atalanta, and then all of a sudden we're supposed to be part of a Super League and we're in danger of not making top four. So just a wild 24 hours, eh, Lewis?
Yeah, it was crazy. I was telling someone, I was like, I went from arguing about not needing Ronaldo in the game yesterday to literally this. But I
Oh,
completely forgot about that. Like
it's crazy. It is absolutely crazy how it picked up steam. Obviously today, Florentino Perez coming out with his interview, and they're pot committed, man.
yeah.
Like Agnelli and Perez are pot committed right now, man. That's just like he laid it out, and it was crystal clear, man. Like,
Yeah.
crystal clear. I want to get your take overall on this Super League. How you feel, and have things changed with this interview, and just where you're at.
Yeah, well, when the news first broke, I found myself being like 70-30, like not in favor of the Super League. Because when the news first broke, it kind of like sounded like a break off, or they were going to do their own version of the Champions League, you know, where just 20 teams kind of just screw off and do their own thing. Hearing Fiorentino Perez's interview today, it made me feel a little bit better. I'm still leaning against it, but there's hope for it is what I would say is my perspective now. But my first reaction, which obviously isn't the final judgment, we could be back here in 2 years. I could be like, this is the greatest idea ever. But my first judgment is that I'm not I'm not really in favor of it at the moment.
Yeah, and I gotta ask why. Like, and this is one of the things I'm asking. Is I even put out a poll today because I was shocked to see just some fans actually saying they would retract their support of Juventus if this goes through. And I'm just thinking, like, wow, like, is that where we're at right now? To the point where you'd stop supporting Juventus because they're one of the founding clubs of this Super League and trying to break away from the Champions League thing. And the poll was, at one point there was 15-16% that said they would bail on Juventus.
Wow.
And I was shocked that it was actually at 15-16%. And, the majority, obviously, I think now it's sitting somewhere around 90%, 10%, and the majority are saying it doesn't really matter where the hell Juventus plays. I'm supporting them first and foremost. And, like you're hearing things like this, and I'm just not at that point where I'm like upset about this thing and seeing why the fans are so up in arms about it. Because I still think there's so many questions left to be answered, and whether they're upset about like the dreams kind of going away from those smaller sides, that's still left yet to be determined, right? And the more I think about it, the more I'm starting to wrap my head around this thing as it could possibly be something really, really good. The more I start to think about it. How do you feel when you hear people say that like, because there's been a lot of those posts where I'm done with
Yeah,
this club.
like I understand where some people like part of the reason you love the game, right, is the tradition. Like the cultural impact that Juventus has on Italian football, or Italian Americans, or Italian Canadians. Your background to it, right? Like from my personal experience, like Juventus being in the Italian national team, like that was it for me. So I understood that when the rumors like first broke, like, hey, like, like they might be leaving the league, or, hey, it's the Super League, or it's this, like I understood that a little bit, where fans were kind of like, oh, knee jerk reaction, like screw the club. But, at the end of the day, like, it's all about love, and you're going to root for your club no matter where they are. And as I know, we were around when they were in Serie B, and that was awful. But you still rooted for them every week.
Yeah.
So I think that anyone who really says that is probably pretty plastic. But if you could make a fair argument for saying, hey, like I don't want to watch football again because this isn't what football is to me. Okay, but to say I'm going to go root for Roma or Napoli, like give me a break.
I know, like that's where I gotta draw the line. And real quick, I just want to give a shout out to UV Daily checking in. Hi, Malke Holla and Jonathan. Shout out from Maryland. Shout out from Canada, British Columbia, and my man Lewis in.
Jonathan pushing that midnight oil, eh?
Yeah, there you go. I like it. So back to the Super League here. Oh, and real quick, everybody that's joining live, hit that like. And if you're checking it in for the first time, subscribe. We got a lot of fun stuff. Watch alongs, post-match podcast, pre-match day lives. Make sure you subscribe. Okay, back to the Super League. So Florentino Perez coming out of this interview. Just crazy. You had UEFA there, Alexander Sefrin there with his comments about Agnelli, and just it's getting ugly. It's getting ugly fast, and Florentino came out and just laid the hammer down. This thing's happening. He said it doesn't matter about these clubs. Like people are asking, they asked about Bayern, they asked about PSG, whether it's true or not, if he approached them or not. Regardless, he just said, look, this thing is going down. Like it's happening. And
by the way,
yeah,
this idea that he didn't ask PSG or Bayern is such a crock of shit. Like, that wasn't the case. PSG said no because the World Cup's in Qatar and they didn't want to risk a ban. And the Club World Cup is also in Qatar. Their owners are from there. And Bayern may have just said no because they don't like the idea, or Germany wasn't convinced by it. But there's no way they left the two best teams in the world. And PSG have Neymar and Mbappe, two of the biggest stars.
Yeah, I know it's hard to believe that they wouldn't have asked those clubs, and maybe who knows. And this is one of the things with this whole Super League is we don't know what's actually going to develop once it gets going.
Yeah,
because a lot of the uproar is that it's a closed league. Like these guys have just done that. Well, I just want to point out, like Champions League now put out their reform. That's supposed to kick off in 2024. And it has 4 positions for elite clubs that haven't qualified. So they're literally going to do the same thing. They're going to scrap the groups and make it a league. And they're going to give you more games, which increases the revenue. All these things these clubs act. But the problem is it's too little too late. You guys shot yourselves in the foot. And this is why I can't really... Number one, I can't sympathize for them because they're crooked. Okay, FIFA and UEFA are just freaking rotten. Okay, and then you have this. So now you put out this reform, but the problem is, if you were a business owner, and this is how I'm looking at it, if I owned this club, now you're offering me the same thing we can now organize ourselves and not even have you guys involved. Why would you do that as a business owner? Like if you specifically owned one of these clubs in the Super League, Lewis, okay, and you're going through COVID, this is another factor that nobody's really talking about, is that these clubs are they're hurting. I mean, Juve ripped through a bond, a 300 million euro bond, like nothing.
Most of them Ronaldo's salary probably.
Gone. 300 million euro bond, gone. 200 million euros in the hole. Now, clubs like this, they can carry the deficit. They don't care about carrying the deficit. They were managing with Plus Valenza and whatnot, managing the books just to make sure that they were in line to not get penalized. They don't care about carrying a deficit. The problem is when your revenue is gone, when all of a sudden a massive amount of your revenue is gone. It's crazy. You have to act. The other thing that nobody's really talking about is if you as a club owner and a business owner, whatever that is, if all of a sudden you're starting to delay payments to your staff, your like the players are now at risk of payments getting delayed.
Mhm.
The club has to ask this question of when is enough enough, and you have to make a move. Because I don't see UEFA, I don't see FIFA stepping in there with any kind of aid.
No. And you know what? Like the business end of this is the one thing you can't argue. Like, I've been against the Super League, like the concept of how it's set up. I've been tweeting a bunch and saying, hey, like you can't support UEFA. It's a corrupt organization, just like FIFA. Google search them, Google search FIFA, UEFA corruption. You have a long list of crimes that come up. Case in point, I was talking about some people on Twitter about this, but Roma beat Barcelona a couple years ago. That the Manolas goal, Roma from their ruins, classic match, and then UEFA hit them with financial fair play and they had to sell all their players. Like they didn't help anything, and they just took COVID and was like, yeah, you'll fix it. Well, these clubs are desperate, and this is a desperate move by a bunch of desperate clubs. Is to come together and try and gain some revenue and try and share some revenue. If you look at the people at the forefront, Real Madrid, Juventus, Liverpool is a big name in there. Milan, Merida, like these are all clubs that are really struggling right now. The ones who they had trouble convincing, City and Chelsea, have the least amount to lose because they had money this year to spend. Like the only club that had money that surprised me, they were like, yes, immediately, was Manchester United because they had money to spend.
Yeah.
Like they were in prime position to compete for anyone this summer.
Well, the Premier League in general,
Yeah.
is a crazy money-making machine, where you have teams like they're battling relegation in Premier League, and they're making big bucks.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's
So
insane.
that league in general, it's wild. Lorenzo coming in saying hello. Hey Lorenzo, thanks for joining. Enya saying hi, I'm so attached to this topic. Absolutely. It's wild. It's pretty damn close to when 2006 went down, before as the World Cup was happening.
It has that kind of feel to it.
It's got that vibe, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It really, really does, with the journalists, even journalists and pundits battling each other on this topic. It's wild, man. Wild to see. Enya coming in saying, before we kind of dive in really deep, where do the both of us kind of stand? Now, I kind of mentioned earlier in this that I was at first, and I think more because of the emotion of us losing and just where we're standing, being like, man, the Super League's a joke because of where we are. We can't handle business right now. And this is almost feels like a bailout. But the more I think about it, the more I wrap my head around this and look at it from a club owner standpoint and a business standpoint and where the club stands financially, the more it makes sense to do this. And just like the reasons Lewis even just gave now. So I was at first kind of like a 75, 25, 80 to 20 no. And now I'm kind of like, let's see what happens. Maybe a flip to 75, 25 yes, somewhere around there. Lewis, where do you stand?
I'm like on the fence, 55% no, 45% yes. I just want to see how they're going to set it up, how exclusive it's going to be, because I'm not saying that like you want clubs like Burnley to pop up in the would-be Champions League, but there are some clubs like Roma, Napoli, Atalanta, Leicester who put a lot of money into their clubs that should be able to play for the top trophy. I think that they deserve it. Al, you muted yourself.
I have no idea. Didn't touch anything. Anyways. Yeah, the thing is, as you think about this and you look at it, like they opened up the door, and Florentino opened up the door for these other clubs. I kind of like the fact of the clubs he named. Kind of made me chuckle a bit.
Yeah.
But he opened up the door, and I think this was one of my things as we were speculating in our group chat there, Lewis, with the all UVCast team. Is I said, look, we don't know where this could go. Like this could end up being like a 3-division Super League, that there are room for teams to advance and whatnot. And maybe those founding members are the locks, and everybody else has an opportunity to get in there and get a piece of it. The other thing is too, if UEFA wants to continue, like this is the part that kind of gets me too, is if UEFA, is going to boycott all these, like they're so upset about this or whatnot, and they want their thing going or whatnot. If it's your product and you need to get this big cut and you were unwilling to budge or whatnot, why are you absolutely scrambling now? Because these teams are leaving, because you have no problem. Like these are your draw. These are your clubs.
Mm-hmm.
And I made that reference earlier that if you're a prize fighter, okay, and you have a bigger following, you're a main draw. People are tuning in because you're the guy. When you do that, and you go out and you do a pay-per-view or whatnot, you're expecting to get a bigger cut. And I don't think the clubs are wrong in wanting that when they have the bigger overheads, they have the bigger payrolls, they have the bigger followings, they put all that in, they should get a bigger piece of that pie. In my personal opinion, I don't think they're wrong for that, to be honest. And for UEFA to not recognize that, and it's really hard to side with them because they literally, they're not necessary at all in this whole thing.
Yeah, and the way that they distribute it too. I mean, I don't know what it was like in Canada, but to watch Barcelona and Juventus in a match that decided a group where Messi and Ronaldo was playing was not on the main network cable television. You had to go and stream it because they had a random Premier League team playing a bottom team. And you're like you're flipping the channels and you're like, are you kidding me? It's Ronaldo and Messi maybe for the last time, Barcelona, Juventus for the group. And it's not there. So UEFA, like they're not an innocent party here. And they definitely, they messed up a lot this year specifically. I mean, they got wrong a lot, but this year with the condensed schedule, I mean, even just look at like the World Cup qualifying or, like the European Euros or the Euro qualifying, the Nations League stuff, like they've crammed schedule after schedule, and all it does is hurt these teams. They don't compensate them. They don't apologize for it. They just kind of do it. And that was one thing I liked about Perez's interview, that quote where he references LeBron. And he said, well, we know what LeBron's salary is, but we don't know how much the guys at the top of UEFA make. Like, it's a very valid point. That's been a question about FIFA and UEFA for years, is how much are the guys at the top scraping away? And the one beauty of this whole thing, and that's why I've kind of come down a little bit on it, is now the clubs have some power. If they wanted to meet and they wanted to restructure it and be like, hey, we're going to use our format, you're either in or you're out, or we're going to use the Champions League format, but we want more control, more revenue. Like, they have leverage now.
Yeah.
As long as they stick together, which is apparently rumored to not be as secure as Perez says.
Yeah. The weird thing is like, it's history. It's the history that's fucked up in all this, right? Now all of a sudden this Champions League tournament is kind of gone.
Yeah.
The last time Juve won it is 1996. And it's like you're kind of done. You're not even playing for it. But like they will lose that mystique, not having all those teams in there. And that's why they're panicking too. And that's the thing, is they let it get to this point, by not working with the clubs a bit better and just getting greedy.
And also,
really getting greedy.
This is a question I propose to people. So if you can't miss the Champions League, right? Like you're automatically in the Super League, like you're guaranteed it. Let's say Juventus next year, March comes around, they're 10 points off the top of the table. What's the motivation to win the title? Try and make a run at it. Not much. They could just say, hey, we're just going to play the young kids and, throw in the towel for the year. I mean, this is a problem that American sports have, where you can't get relegated. You can't fall out of anything because, it doesn't really matter. You're not winning the thing anyway. And that's an interesting, kind of.
So are you talking about that in reference to the domestic league, if they stay there, or just the Super League?
I'm talking about the domestic league. Like if you're, let's say, if you're competing for the domestic league, right? And you're saying this is all like still competitive league, and it's just like normal Serie A, right? And Juventus is so they're 10 points off of like Milan, right? And they're in second place. There's like it's February. What stops them from saying, okay, well, we're not gonna go all the way with this because we have the Super League. It's not like we're battling for top four. We stay put. Whatever our result in the Super League is, we'll take it. We're going to make our money from that. Do they still make the same push for Serie A? That's one of the things I wonder as a fan. How much do these clubs, I mean, they do it now at the Champions League. Some do, some don't. But you do wonder, like, how much do these clubs, like, put emphasis into the league now when they know that, hey, I'm guaranteed a spot here? Like, you could just basically be like, oh, like, Serie A really doesn't matter because we're guaranteed here. We'll focus here.
Yeah.
Lose. I know there's a huge narrative right now, or there was at the start of the year, that after 9 Scudetti, like, we're over it. We're not going to miss it. Let's move on to the Champions League. That's never really settled well for me. I know you're kind of the same thing. Like, like winning Scudetto is a pleasure. Like, you want that joy. And I don't think maybe Juventus won't do this, maybe they will, but like you do have to wonder, like, what stops your club from, going all the way if they're like, oh, well, there's more money to be made here, or, our place isn't in jeopardy. So we could kind of be like, oh, we'll just coast through the rest of the Serie A and try and win the Super League.
Yeah. It's I don't know, man. That's a tough one. There's still money involved, albeit such a small chunk, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, the bread and butter would end up being. Oh well, Malky just said it too. The bread and butter would end up being the Super League for sure. With the finances there and whatnot. I'd like to, I mean, all at this point you could really do is hope that they continue to push for the domestic titles and whatnot. And the thing is too is that I don't really know. They may end up doing something that ties into this league as well in terms of who wins their league, their actual league winners or whatnot domestically, right? This is literally just a starting point to break away from the handcuffs that UEFA has them in, right? Mm-hmm. And I totally get that. And that's actually just such a great point you brought up, man, about will they still push, having that guarantee. And it's no different than now. And I even asked the question on the podcast this morning. I said, is this why the trigger hasn't been pulled on Pirlo? Yeah. Is this why they like, did they know this was going to come down the pipe around this time of the season? And they were like, hey, yeah, no, cool. We'll ride it out. I'll just take that 1.8 mil. Then we'll get our 350 mil guarantee once we join the Super League, that JP Morgan's funding, and then we're good to go.
The January meeting where Perez flew into Turin and everyone thought he was trying to come back for Ronaldo. Narrative changes a little bit, huh?
Yeah, it does, man. It's the whole thing it's wild. I don't know if there's still a lot of questions to be answered, right? And that's why I said, like, who knows? But I ultimately do think, like, the more I think about, like, why should any club that's, big like that's got big sponsorships, big followings and whatnot, that's the main draw, share quite a bit with, like, Ferencváros, for instance, when they play them or whatnot, right? And I get the allure of that underdog thing in Champions League and seeing these teams beat these bigger teams on, like, a big night or whatnot, and it's cool and whatnot. But if we're being serious, there's been a gap for quite some time in smaller clubs and the bigger clubs for quite some time. This isn't going to just start now because of the Super League or whatnot, and the funny thing is like, everybody's been against Juve for so long, and now all of a sudden this whole Super League thing, and it's like, no, you guys aren't going to be allowed in our league then if you're going to leave us. fuck? You guys tried to kill us in 2006.
Yeah. Well, that cracked me up because imagine trying to have a league without the Milan clubs and Juventus. You've been to Italy, you go in any shop in Italy, the first 3 jerseys you find are the Milan clubs and Juventus.
Yeah. Yeah. And look at AJ, perfect timing. Says the same thing. It's ironic that all those smaller teams kept saying Juventus are ruining the league. And now that we're breaking away, they're suddenly, in tears about it. And it's funny. And the nice thing for me though, and you and I talked about this a lot on our team chat there, is that I don't want to see the domestic side of things change for the culture, historic rivalries, and everything like that. I don't want to see that change.
As long as the effort and the passion remains, I think people could get behind it. I think when we see it actually play out, I think that'll be like what a lot of people, kind of rally behind. Like, will it amend to a tier system in a year? Probably not. They're going to test run it next year with 20 teams. There'll probably be some like makeshift European competition for the rest. And then, they'll expand it as it gets bigger and they get sponsors and things like that. But, I think that there's a lot of rumors and there's a lot of weird time, but I was really happy to see both the club presidents and Agnelli show up to the Serie A meeting today and kind of, talk things over. It was really funny to hear Torino's director call our director Judas.
Oh my God, man. It's unbelievable, man.
And the fact that he owns Marca, who was just trashing us all day.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. This thing, we get into it. I mean, and everybody's reporting something different, But the nice thing about Perez is he addressed everything because there was already rumors of a couple of the Premier League teams cracking, and he's like, "No, we're in contract. Everybody that's already been announced is locked in, 23 years, long term." Some of the clubs, there was rumored that they're feeling the heat all of a sudden, trying to back out, but Perez just he shut it down. It's, I don't know, man.
Well, the flip side to like the feeling the heat argument is if you're one of the Premier League Big Six, or let's say you were let's say AC Milan was like, we don't know if we want to do this. You're going to rejoin your domestic league where it's missing the 5 best teams.
Yeah,
it's not good for your brand.
55% salary cap in the Super League.
I love the salary cap idea. I don't trust anyone in the Super League to enforce that.
Yeah, it's going to be, again, I like the idea. I want to see it backed up, though.
Yeah.
Fucking Man City's in the damn league. They're going to break some rule.
Listen, I know everyone loves Fiorentino Perez, but do we forget the year after Cardiff, they ran one of the most rigged tournaments ever. Watch the Bayern game. They scored 4 offside goals. Then they had the Buffon red card.
Yeah, I know. And that's the thing.
People forgot that Perez was I used to call them the evil empire and called him Palpatine for years.
Do we get fucked over just in a different league? If we just move, we're gonna have money now, but we're still gonna get fucked over.
Yeah, we're his best friend now, but does that change?
I know. It's crazy, man. Perez saying if we can't find an agreement with UEFA, we will not back down. They can wait until 2024 to make some changes. We're not waiting for anyone because we need the Super League. And again, talking about the finances of where the clubs are at. I just don't understand this, how it's necessarily ruining the game. That's the part that I can't really grasp or latch onto when that's the main complaint, that people are just like, this will kill the game. And I'm not feeling that way. Are you feeling like it's going to kill the game?
I have some reservations in that regard, but they're more about the business model than necessarily the league itself.
Like, I hope not Lorenzo.
Yeah, but that I have to add before I answer that question. I did ask if clubs are taking the wins over, are we still carrying the losses, or do we start fresh? Because I think that's a little unfair. You know?
Oh man, that part of it's ridiculous when they're talking about the trophies carrying over and whatnot. Like, no, you're starting new. This is fresh. Like,
Yeah,
they're talking about carrying those titles over, and it's like, oh yeah, Super League champion, like fucking 13 times, 7 times. Like, no, this is fresh.
yeah. But to answer your original question, I mean, like I brought up about the domestic leagues, like that's something I'd be curious about. Like
Yeah,
does it stay competitive? What if they can't create a second or third tier for some of these clubs? What do clubs like Leicester City or Atalanta or Napoli or Roma or Ajax? There's a really good conversation to be held about Ajax, the Dutch league, the Belgium league, and I think the Danish league all made their own super league to adjust to UEFA. Like they all combined to make a bigger league and like put 3 or 4 teams in there and kind of shrink the model. So like there is some Ajax has more European titles than we do. I mean they're not as big of a brand, but in fairness, that stings a little bit. I know, but
it really does.
yeah, but it is a point that has to be made.
Fuck,
But
I don't need that shit at 10 p.m. though.
yeah, well, hey, it's going through my head at 1 o'clock. You're getting it at midnight or 10.
All right.
But so to the original point is, like the American business model where they want to sell like the NBA or the NFL. What you have is you kind of have a lot of teams that like you have a couple teams that compete or know they're going to compete. And you get like a bunch of like maybes, and then you got the bottom pack, and the bottom pack is like kind of just happy to be there. Like they're collecting their paycheck and they're kind of rebuilding for the next 5 to 10 years. Well, there's no ramifications on your league title and there's no like ramifications on the Super League. You could basically collect free transfers, pay people minimum wage, make some money, and like, hey, you got revenue. Or
Yeah.
what if they decide to like clean break just in general? They may not, and they go like a traveling circus. Like we could be playing games in Saudi Arabia again, like random stuff like that. Like,
Well, I think it's if that became the case at some point, the players will form a union
you would hope, yeah.
because they're not puppets, and if that shit starts to go down, something's going to be said. You
Yeah.
know, um,
But those
but
are all hypotheticals as to like what could happen. I'm not saying that necessarily would happen, but like if it was going to ruin the game, that's the avenue where it could.
the only way I could really see, wrap my head around like what could potentially be bad is the talent pool for the other clubs.
Yeah.
It's like if all of a sudden all the money's here and everybody's just gearing up to try and get on one of the clubs that's in that. And this is why I think that salary cap thing is crucial, and I like seeing it because if they start to run a monopoly on the talent, that's not right in terms
Yeah.
of the game, and that part of it isn't right. So the biggest thing for me is when Florentino, addresses, and I hope it comes to fruition if this thing all goes down, because I still think there's a lot more coming, and there's going to be legal battles going down. You can count on that. But for me, the biggest thing is they can't just run a monopoly on the talent pool. The best thing would have been if if UEFA would have just come to an agreement with them and they could have worked together, would have been probably the best. But honestly, I'm thinking potentially it could be better cutting them out completely and scrapping them. And if Champions League, like, it sucks for the history or whatnot, but UEFA's kind of done it to themselves again. And I honestly, I don't have sympathy for them.
Yeah.
But here's another thing is the potential's there for them to run that still. And the teams out of the domestic leagues that qualify go to their league. the Super League remains, and that could be another tier of funds for teams that normally wouldn't get into that competition.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden they have that flux financially. And all of a sudden you have more teams making more money. The problem is, and this is why UEFA dropped the fucking ball big time, is because they know sponsorship, TV deals, all that is going to be following the big guys.
Yeah.
And that's where they drop the friggin' ball, because again, they don't have an actual product.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so if you're relying on somebody else, you need to pony up, and they needed to do it quicker, because now, and again, if we look back to when COVID went down, you know, and I'm thinking about all these scenarios now as all this is kind of happening. We talked about there's been no aid from FIFA or UEFA for these teams going through COVID.
Yeah.
Like they don't give a shit. You know, they don't. And all this thing about turning on these clubs, I'm not grasping why the clubs are seen as the bad guys because of this. I mean, when you look at their financial situations right now, Real Madrid spent $0 in the Mercado for the first time ever.
Yeah.
Unprecedented. Barcelona is like literally hanging on by a goddamn thread.
Yeah.
You know, football can't afford, like, could you imagine football without Barcelona?
Yeah, it'd be devastating.
Regardless of what you think of that club or anything, like, to see these teams in this need, and like
La Liga, it would just be over.
yeah, there's no way these teams can continue. And if you're looking at it as a business, which it is, people need to understand this has been a business for a very, very long time now.
Yeah.
And when the money gets inflated to what it has been, yeah, fuck, you bet it's going to get intense. And when you have somebody that's taken the majority of it out of your pocket, you're going to look for a way out. It's just, it was coming for a long time. Now, the thing is that when COVID went down and there was still, you had the FIGC, and this is why I think it's very, very funny that UEFA is now trying to push for these leagues to not allow these clubs to play in their leagues, because when the leagues came out and said, hey, we want to protect guys because of COVID or whatnot, we're not going to be continuing. UEFA came out and said immediately, we don't care what the leagues say. Like, we don't need the league's authority to run Champions League. Do you think they did that for the fans?
No.
Fuck no.
No, they did it for themselves.
They did it for themselves.
Yeah.
And this is the funny thing, is both parties are trying to do the same thing.
Yeah. And you can argue that some of these clubs' financial situations kind of come back to UEFA a little bit. Like Barcelona, you know, they're never charged with financial fair play, but you know, they spent $100 million on 3 players that were busts back-to-back years. I mean, I think Dembele was just under $100 million, but Coutinho, Griezmann were both right there. You know, like, no ramifications. They didn't make that money back. You know, I mean, there are some clubs where, like, you know, I understand, like Bayern does business very, very smart. That's why they had money left over. You know, Chelsea were suspended all last year, so that's why they have money. You know, they didn't spend anything the year before.
Yeah.
City just have money. Same with PSG. You know, like, that's United, same way. You know, I think that Juventus had issues before COVID. COVID made a lot of these issues worse. You know, the hope is just going forward is that the clubs don't dig themselves into a hole where if something catastrophe happens again, that they're, you know, like, not at the bottom, just like, oh, what do we do now, and panic, right? You know, the one thing that they don't like to mention is the Super League. Fiorentino hinted it in his press conference. He changed it. First he said it was, oh, we came up with this because of COVID. Then he hinted 2-3 years ago we were thinking about this. And then he was like, oh, we've been thinking about this for 20 years. Like,
yeah,
you know, like they've been thinking about it for a while. It makes sense financially. Like, I understand it, you know, but let's make sure when they do this properly, you know, they get what they're looking for, and they don't necessarily, whatever restrictions they have, they hold them so they don't put themselves in the hole, because financial fair play didn't hold anyone. and some of these clubs dug themselves graves a little bit. I mean,
Yeah. And
pre-COVID, like Juventus has been selling players to make money back just to bounce the books the last 2 years.
yeah. And here's Saw coming in with, what if a top club doesn't get a top four domestic spot, but still gets to play in the Super League? Isn't that unfair? And this is the thing. I mean, if Champions League, Europa League continue on, and you just take those Super League teams out of the equation, and then it becomes the top four remaining. It's strange. It's a weird setup, right? And this is the one thing for me where there is that gray area: is how's it going to work with these clubs when they go domestically? And that's why, like, salary cap, all that and whatnot, because you can't have these teams running around being able to spend every single cent there, walking back into their leagues, getting this mass revenue boost and just running away with the league, right? Or having these crazy rosters. So a cap, stuff like that, like, it's got to work. But the other thing is, again, will there be opportunities for these other clubs? There's only going to be 5 spots from when they want to start, because they said they want to fill 15 locked teams and have 5 spots, right? And this is where it starts to get kind of funny when you think about it, regardless of it, whether you're for or against or whatnot, because you're starting to think, like, man, these teams haven't really, like, why is it them? Like, you've got Arsenal or whatnot. Like,
in the case of Arsenal and Spurs, these are 2 teams that have no European pedigree. I mean, Spurs haven't won a trophy ever. Arsenal, haven't been relevant in the Premier League for now a decade. Like, I think they no trophies. They've won finals appearance. They lost. So you kind of scratch your head and you're like, okay, what's this about, right? Like, that's not very fair. Juventus at least has 9 league titles to fall back on.
yeah,
that's. So I think that Sad brings up a good point. For some of these clubs, like, if you have a club that keeps finishing mid-table, something's got to give here. Like, either they're just collecting a paycheck or they're not really trying to win anything. It's.
Yeah, and that's why I think that's why it's crazy that it's locked in, like, apparently like 23 years, what he said, with these contracts or whatnot, because that is weird. Like, if a team starts to start, but again, like, I can't see it. I can't see a team struggling. Like, now all of a sudden, if they get the finances right, with boost rosters and stuff, like, they should be fine.
But the case in point, like, Arsenal financially aren't really that horribly off.
No.
Their owner just doesn't spend anything. He's like Sam Kroenke is, like, known for that. He just refuses to. He just owns teams and refuses to invest in them. He picks one to invest in, and that's it.
Yeah. The other thing is too, is it just, I mean, you could argue some of those clubs in there. You could definitely argue some of those clubs, like, why them, right? But again, it's a starting point.
Yeah.
It's a starting point. You can always build off it. You can make it better. You can improve it. The biggest thing for them and these clubs, and this is, like, I'm hearing a lot of talk about morals, the club's morals, what it stands for, all this in regards to this whole thing. Like, that's how strongly some fans feel about them being locked into this, be like, I'm not going to support this club. We talked about that earlier. Like, I'm done if they do this. But what good are a club's morals if the club disappears because they're just ruined financially? Like, what good is it then? Like, they at the end of the day, they need to look out for their product. They have to look out for their product. That's just, like, the morals, all that goes out the window when all of a sudden you're suffering big time. And you're in financial hardships, and you've got a major loss in revenues, and there's really not a timeline for that getting corrected, other than possibly towards the end of May, getting like 1,000 fans back in stadiums. It's the money going out is way too much at the moment, right? And it's just not enough of it coming in. So they have to do this. The way I'm looking at it with the clubs, just as an owner, like, you have to do this. And now the money goes to the clubs, not UEFA, pocketing all this for nothing,
Yeah.
for literally nothing. So yeah, it's the whole thing's crazy. AJ coming in here with, we won 9 in a row and finished 5th in the 10th year. We still deserve to be in the Champions League more than a team which won nothing but finished 4th. So that's just talking more, I guess, in terms of historical finishes and just that they're still technically, they've been doing it for so long. This club just squeaks by on a few points. Like now all of a sudden they're in there, but it's tough because that's part of the competition.
So what if your hypothetical club to counter that is Atalanta, who've been in the Champions League now 3 years in a row, have had the same results that we've had, right? They've gone just as far as us. They haven't won the titles, but that's the team that gets in and you don't. Like, you could make the argument, hey, they beat us head to head this year. They kind of earn it, right? I understand they didn't win the league 9 years in a row, but maybe one thing I understand what he's talking about. If Napoli
Yeah.
us and if they squeak by a point, that's a really reasonable argument. My counter to that would be though, like take the Premier League. Like West Ham getting in is kind of crazy, COVID helped West Ham get in there because Liverpool, Spurs, and Chelsea are all dumpster fires, but a team like Leicester City, who put a bunch of money in there, paid their dues to get back into the top 4. They were almost there last year before COVID. If a team like that, they're gonna be like, oh, we're gonna leave Man City in there. If they beat them out, it's a little hard on the Leicester Cities and the Atalantas who have been around lately.
Yeah. I want to ask you a question because this is what some people are arguing about going into this thing. Getting tired of the matches. Part of the beauty of these big teams lining up is that you don't see it so often, and starting to see them play each other often would get boring. Do you think you'd get bored of seeing these big teams line up, or would it still be super exciting? And do you think it'd get tiresome and you just be like, oh man, this is...
I think everything gets tiresome with time. That's a personal thing. I mean, it's kind of a subjective question anyway, but I think the novelty wears off in 3 to 5 years. You start to get to okay, this is really cool, but what could we do to expand it? What if it wasn't the same 20 teams? The fun thing about the Champions League is, 10 years ago, we'd never talk about PSG in the same breath as, Manchester United or, Real Madrid or Barcelona. Hell, 10 years ago, Juventus wouldn't even be in the same breath compared to where we were, post Calciopoli, so a lot can change. It's really tough because I don't want to say, hey, I'd get tired of seeing us play United or Barcelona or Real Madrid. I mean, we've played Barcelona and Real Madrid, I don't know how many times in the Champions League, but some of the English clubs, I'd really like to see, so it's a tough one to say no to, but I do think some novelty would wear off, to have a short answer.
Yeah, I don't know, man. We're saying in one breath that we don't want the domestic stuff, affected because we like that history and we like those rivalries and we like those matches. And now all of a sudden, you have the big guns and that will become a rivalry. Now all of a sudden, you're going to see these guys going at it all the time. And I fucking love Juve beating Real Madrid.
Yeah.
So if I could see them go and we start going with it's cool. I think personally, 10 teams would have been awesome.
Yeah.
The other 10, that's a rotation, right?
Yeah.
I think 5 just kind of isn't enough. 10 would be okay, this is exciting because you've got half your league locked in. And then you've got half that could be man, who's going to make it into this thing this year?
Yeah. And your 10 could be based on how they do domestically, right? Juventus 9 titles, so they should be in there,
Yeah.
10 times.
Because the funny thing is now is Champions League's doing that. They're already at 32 teams and their reform for 2024 is to add 4 spots for elite teams that didn't qualify.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think Marcin had said it earlier in this chat room here. There you go. Regardless if this happens or not, things are going to change in football.
Yeah.
And I agree with him. Like, this is just kind of like, it's just reached a boiling point pretty much with the financial situations and everything. And now teams are standing up and these presidents are standing up and something's got to give. And UEFA's already now come out with this reform project. So like they're nervous, they're scared because all that sponsorship, all that stuff goes. You know what I mean?
Could I pose the counter question to that? I don't know if you saw Ian Wright's Instagram video today. I don't know if like it popped up on Twitter. It showed up on mine, and he was talking about the Super League. He wasn't a fan of it, like most English pundits are, which is a bunch of hypocrisy in their own right. But we'll get to that. That's a side thing. But he was saying, one of the things I liked about the Champions League was I only got to play AC Milan twice in my life. It was the two-legged tie I had against them in whatever year. He goes, but I always remember that tie because the sample size was so small. So you kind of wonder to yourself, hey, like, what are the games that you remember? Like, we'll remember Juventus coming back and beating Atletico Madrid 3-0 because we don't see it every year, right? And that's where it gets a little dicey. If it stays only 20 teams, it still may change. But those are some hypotheticals you could think about, whereas like, hey, like PSG and Bayern were great this year. Or that little run where PSG and Barcelona used to play all the time was great, or Juventus, Real Madrid. But if you get too much of it, it kind of becomes like a bunch of jumbled up memories, I mean, you've been around the game longer than I have, so like you may like say like, hey, I've watched Juventus play Murder for 30 years now. It never gets old. Like I could be wrong about that, but like it is an interesting flip side of the argument. I do see a little bit of that.
It is. And I think that's why, like, I think if you get some rotation, a heavier rotation than 5 clubs, you can just create that with some of the other ones that influx there, right? It just changes who it is, right? But yeah, the whole thing, man, it's really wild. It's wild how it just hit like that. Just hit like that, and everybody was like, holy thought. I just wanted to just chill out and have some downtime after that fucking loss. And then all of a sudden it's like you just continue this, and then it was just like literally that gift that Anto sent in the team thing where it's just like constantly refreshing the timeline there, right?
I said in the chat this morning the little amount of sleep that I've got, not from like stress, but just from being so wired. It was like a soap opera, like Andrea Agnelli, Godfather in Part 2. Seferin. He was like, like basically Fredoed him. Like
so. I don't know, like for you over there, like in the States there, but like up here, small town in Canada, like nobody really follows the game. Okay.
Yeah.
And I got buddies at work, they bug me about it, like, oh man, you're watching soccer or whatever. I was like, it's football and fuck off, But anyways, even them today are just like, dude, what's going on with the Super League? And I'm like, oh, now you want to talk football with me, you fucker, because it's just all like it's everywhere. CBC's like talking about it. They never talk about like.
I listened to a American sports podcast. Rich Eisen used to be on Sports Center.
Yeah.
He does a lot of like NFL, NBA. He talked about the guys from Ending Blazers about it for 40 minutes today. I was like, I didn't even know he was a fan.
It's wild, man. It's just like it's gone out of control. It's crazy. And like we talked about the similarities of 06 and that feeling and that vibe, right? Like,
well, when you think about the whole story as a collective, it is just insane that 48 hours ago, Andrea Agnelli, who's the president of the ECA, sits down with UEFA. They agree to extend. And then, and he's been the most outspoken guy about the Super League. Paris has too, but everyone likes to poke fun at and yelling because Juventus is Juventus, so it's like, but fast forward, this story leaks, everyone goes, and then like it really comes out and you're like, oh, whoa, this is really happening. And
Well,
then
the
like
website too, though, it's just like, oh, here's the official website. And I'm like, did somebody just create this and they're just really fucking with it and just like,
yeah,
like you gotta ask a question. Somebody just did Nico make this website all of a sudden?
yeah. Well, Nico used to say for years that Greed ran all these clubs, so like I think that he might be onto something.
Might be the one thing he was on.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just that honestly, they should take whatever our Amazon documentary is, destroy it now, and do the interview of how this went down. Like get Sefrin, get Agnelli, get Perez. Like I
Dude,
want
I want to see it all, man. I will lock myself in the theater room for a week and watch all of it if it was a week long. This is unbelievable.
our,
Like
our doc our doc is literally gonna win an Oscar. I mean, the
it's
stuff
going
that's
to be out of control, man. This is crazy. I like it's going to be unbelievable. Matt Milana, good friend of ours here on the pod, worried if it doesn't go through, Juventus would find themselves in a very difficult situation, having Agnelli as the main coordinator of the Super League, up to a point that they force Agnelli to resign. We talked about this earlier, but man, they're locked in, man.
Yeah.
Agnelli and Florentino, they have like they're pot committed, man. This thing's like when Florentino said that, like I know you got to take some of the stuff with a grain of salt. Like when we were talking about caps, we'll see what happens. When we're talking about whether or not he approached some of these other clubs, and Bayern and whatnot. But like the German clubs are run differently because they actually have a percentage of ownership and it's not full, right? That's one of the things. I don't know if Bayern the only team that is not part of that and the rest of the league is?
No, they are. They're newly a part of it too.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And the German teams kind of all like operate on the same level, like they bail each other out a lot. So it makes sense that they all kind of were like, we're good. Like they'll join together if they do.
yeah. And the thing here is with Agnelli, they're locked in. They're pot committed. This happened. And the one thing, taking everything with a grain of salt, I 100% believe Florentino because of the conviction that's like, this is happening. It's signed. It's locked in.
Yeah.
Done. And, Lorenzo brings up a great point. JP Morgan is involved. John Elkin from the Agnelli family is one of the international council board members for JP Morgan. And it's just like
behind the scenes, like I said, is amazing on this. To answer that original question, even if this were to fall through, it's probably not. But let's say it was to fall through, the clubs have leverage now. So if it falls through, UEFA has to give the clubs kind of what they want, and that will be enough to get them through.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. AJ says if it doesn't go through, then that means that UEFA will negotiate a better deal for those clubs, which will save them financially. So it's a win-win situation, and that's kind of where I'm at. Is I just think like something had to give. The teams needed help, and for all those fans, that are like really, really upset and bothered to the point where you're talking about not following the club anymore, supporting like. Would you have rather the club put out a GoFundMe and ask all the fans that have already spent money on tickets and jerseys and stuff? Like, I think this is a much better solution, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And the nice thing is they're trying to find a solution. I mean, at some point you have to stop the bleeding. And again, it just doesn't make sense for a middleman. The history, all that, the culture, the tradition, like that part does sting. But at the same point, like, I just don't want the team to suffer financially any longer. Like things have to get better. And I understand it coming from a business standpoint, and maybe it's because I'm a little more kind of leaning towards being okay with it is because I've been part of a really big corporation here in Canada, and I understand how it works, and I've always said, and it's even documented on this pod in like the first season I did, where I said, hey, these guys want to be ruthless. Like Anelli wants to be ruthless with players and treatment and how they treat certain guys and kick them out or not. I'll be fine with it if you get fucking ruthless and get the results on the pitch, So now all of a sudden he's getting ruthless. He's getting ruthless with UEFA, and I kind of fucking like that, to be honest with you. And I'm fine with it. Let's get some money, boost the team. In terms of how they're going to perform domestically, does that now all of a sudden, are they not too worried about it because they're guaranteed Super League? I think naturally with the influx of money, building a better roster, well, fuck it, Brad, you can't do it now. Jesus Christ. That's a whole different show.
Yeah.
But,
that's a separate Juve.
I think that takes care of itself. I think it's also a good way to even us out, because even though we are kind of considered amongst those teams, there was still always that massive gap from Real and even Barca. You know what I mean? Like you're close, but you're not really. You know what I mean?
Listen, there's a reason why in the last decade, most of the Champions League have been won by Real, Bayern, or Barca. They have more money. And yes, Georg is right. Gianni Agnelli would have done exactly what his sons did today. So
I'm proud of you, Georg, for putting that in the comment section.
Yeah, that's the comment of the night. You win.
I love that.
I think that overall we can agree that the solution is the right idea. The details is what's going to make or break this, I think, for fans. How does this affect the domestic league? Do they actually enforce the rules that they want to put in place? Are they going to shorten games like Perez suggested? Are they going to have the ref wear a mic? There are going to be some things that, we'll have to wait and see. Will they expand? Will they not? And, those details will get grinded out over time. Whether you're for or against it, you can't say you're not entertained by the idea of it,
Yeah.
Like I'm leaning against it, but I'm intrigued by the idea,
Yeah. And that's kind of it. I mean, we've got to see, we still have to see what develops, and there's going to be a lot more that unfolds, and we'll know more. And like I said, it's a starting point, if anything, but it's got the potential to turn into something that's absolutely deadly, absolutely deadly. And it just makes sense if everybody put themselves in an owner's shoes and looked at it from that perspective. Ultimately, if you were suffering that heavily financially, like if all of a sudden I can't pay my mortgage and I can't do things like that, you have to find solutions. I see this as teams finding a solution. Maybe it seems like they're not thinking of fans and whatnot, but ultimately the fans could not have anything to even cheer for if they don't get the finances in check, and if all of a sudden they have to rip into their holding companies' money and whatnot, that's not right either, especially when you have another organization who's again set the tone for being fucking crooked, and they're not stepping up helping any of these clubs. In 2006 too, when Juve went down, I didn't see UEFA lending a helping hand or saying like, hey, this isn't right, or stepping in. Like nobody gave a shit. Nobody gave a shit. No. Now all of a sudden, like to even say like these guys got to give a shit about even Serie A, like all these clubs, this whole meeting today that happened with Serie A and the handful of clubs that were like kick them out immediately, trying to run a meeting without the clubs that are apparently going to be part of the Super League and just trying to get them out already. Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, those are the clubs with the biggest fucking followings, and ain't nobody going to be tuning in to Serie A if those clubs aren't in there. Like you'll get the diehards.
Yeah.
But be careful what you ask for, because that league could probably fucking crumble.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this, but there is some economic, things to look at for each country. Football brings tourism. It brings, attention to certain cities. Non-big cities in each country. Small towns that like have clubs there. So one of the allures to having teams that could get into the Champions League is that they could, potentially host one of those matches, or having big players come to your league and having them come in week after week, even if it's like not even Juventus, Milan, Merda that have all the big players, like it could be Napoli or Roma that have big players, right? As long as some big players are coming to your league, you know, that is a huge factor. And I hope that they took that into consideration when they made this. And they weren't like, because when you hear some of the things about how the younger generation operates and it's not really club oriented, it's player oriented, you almost get a little bit of vibes like, okay, we're making sure we stay put, but the rest could fall off and we're prepared if that happens, right? Um, and so you do want to make sure that they're considering everyone as well as themselves, like as a whole. There's a lot of things that go into this decision.
Yeah. And again, a starting point, because say they get it going, pick up a little steam. Now all of a sudden you've created a second division.
Mm-hmm.
Now all of a sudden some of these teams, maybe they pull in and they're like, okay, this is our second division. Those teams crack into the top and there you go. Now all of a sudden you've got a team that's made some kind of move. That's a massive, massive payout in comparison to Champions League.
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden, they're not just getting these one-offs and bounced out of a group. They're guaranteed more matches.
Mm-hmm.
And they're getting a hell of a lot more money, plus the tourism, plus all that. Like if they can grow this, the money is now all with the clubs. So even those smaller sides, when they get into the chances, they're still not getting their fair cut.
Yeah.
So
that's kind of what I was alluding to. It's like, hey, like the ball doesn't just stop here. Like this is the test run. This is the solution that they want, but how they adapt and expand it or, bring it to life, I think is the huge thing.
Yeah. New movie idea, Agnelli's Calciopoli Revenge. The plot of 15 years.
God, you know what, Georg? I hope that they suspend the league for this and Merda don't get that trophy,
Oh, man.
That was one thing I was hoping was going to happen at the meeting today, was they were just going to be like, oh, the league's over. We don't have to watch Juventus be miserable for the rest of the year. And
so they're gonna basically have another meeting tomorrow, I guess, Serie A. So it'll be interesting to see what comes of that, for sure. It's crazy times, man. Crazy times. But
what's great about this? I was like kind of like nervous that we could like choke against Parma, which is crazy to think about, but it's happened this year. And now I'm just kind of like, doesn't really matter. Like,
it matters.
Obviously, I want to see us win, but like it doesn't. Like, I guess I kind of just made myself a hypocrite there.
Well, I don't know. Let's see what happens. It'd be interesting to see, man. I don't know. Like the game's changed so much, and like the amount of money involved, and we talked about it loosely, and just the team itself changing and us losing ties with the Azzurri. And I kind of just talked a bit about the impact. Like when you have those Italians, it's not anything more than the odd guy that comes abroad understands Juve's history, understands what it means to play for the club. But everyone in Italy, whether you support them or not, knows that it's a big deal.
Yeah.
So you start to lose that, and then you start to get that feeling of, is the desire there, is the passion there? And you get some of these guys that are hired like mercenaries that come in like Ramsey, Rabiot, that don't really get that. they're on big inflated pay, wages, and you're just like, man, the payoff's not there. You know what I mean? And like you start to lose that. And I think, again, just bringing in good talent, getting the money right, doing a good job with your goddamn roster. I think these guys are still competing. There's still money on the line, for the trophies. I think eventually, as a Super League grows, I think that's going to tie into performance. I think it's going to be incentive based too. I think the guys will still ultimately be playing. I can't see them just sitting down in league, just because they've got that going on, right? Because at the same time, it's the credibility,
Mm-hmm.
I can't see these guys going into that league and a team like Juventus, for instance, all of a sudden being a shit show, not playing good, and all of a sudden being like, oh, yeah, no, it's fine because we got this. We'll just be embarrassing right now. I can't see that whatsoever. They're still going to fight for the wins. It's still going to be about winning. And there's going to be a better split for the teams winning. You can almost bank on that. They're going to be going for it. I still think on all fronts because of the.
Well, and hey, at least in the short term, there's more motivation for a Roma or a Napoli to invest and go for the Serie A title next year than probably ever before, because now you got to stick it to the Super League clubs,
Yeah. Georg coming in saying the Serie A shouldn't be a top 4 fight. It should be a fight for the Scudetto. And yeah, I mean, that's fine. But again, you got to see what those other leagues do. Champions League, they're going to continue on. Champions League is going to lose a lot of the funds that will be able to go to those teams if they continue, because the sponsors are they'll still have their sponsorships, but the big clubs jumping off,
yeah,
it's gonna hurt them.
Question:
Yukio kind of come in saying something we kind of touched on before. What are your thoughts on these games being played in cities around the world? I think it's going to get interesting, and players may have something to say about that one.
Yeah.
So for me, I don't think that's the right move. And I think players would start to have a say on that one.
Yeah, unless they were going to do it like they do like the friendly tournaments, or how they did the Champions League last year, where they just take like the round of 8 and put it one place.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe. Well, here's the one thing I don't want to see. I don't want to see it turn into this XFL gimmick shit.
Yeah.
That's the one thing I can't see. And this is the one thing I had to laugh when Florentino Perez said that some fans say the games are too long, so maybe we play shorter matches. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Don't change the game. Because if that shit starts happening, you're going to lose me. You're going to lose me, not from supporting Juve, but I'll be like, fuck, this is too much of a gimmick. So, and I kind of see this city thing, traveling. It's kind of gimmicky too. Like, it's like, no, just keep it clean. Maybe take your semifinals and final and do it over like a week somewhere, and just be like every week, like every season change that, but don't make it gimmicky. That's my one thing.
If we win the Super League and TikTok stars are handing out our medals, it'll be the death of me. None of that stuff.
Here's a good question as we wrap up here on what's been honestly a lot of fun, and I thank everybody who joined us on the live. It's been awesome, all your questions and everything. And Lewis, like, we had literally like nothing mapped out or anything. We were just kept chatting to each other, and we're like, fuck, let's fire up a pod. And here we are. But thank you, everybody. Please hit the like button. And if you aren't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. It makes a difference. Much appreciated. But here's the final one we should kind of wrap up on. And it's from AJ. Realistically, where do you think we would finish in the Super League?
Do you want me to start?
Yeah.
I think we'd be towards the bottom as of now. If it's just based on like right now, I think we'd probably be like mid-table, like lower mid-table.
Lower, so we're gonna go with the 15 teams, and you think we'll be lower mid.
Yeah, we're better than Arsenal. I think we're better than Spurs. Well, Mourinho is no longer their coach, so I don't know about that one. But we're better than those two teams. Liverpool aren't the best team right now, so we'd probably be like somewhere mixed with them, and maybe like a Chelsea. But I don't think Real Madrid, like Barcelona, like have made kind of a comeback. Those clubs should stomp us. Even United, I think, would, just based on our current form.
Man, yeah, it's hard to really see us doing anything better than that based on what we've been.
Yeah.
Like right now, out of the teams confirmed, yeah, like I can safely say 3 of those clubs we would be for sure better than them on that. But fuck yeah, we've got some work to do. Maybe in the next one, if we can get that instant 350 mil,
Yeah.
and then make the right moves. Watch us still sign a bunch of frees.
I think we should just throw all of our money at Messi and then just call it a day.
350 mil and just sit on it and bring back fucking Sturaro or some shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I kind of with you. I think we'd be somewhere realistically, like somewhere in mid-table or whatnot. But we'd have a lot of money. And
Yeah, I mean, the good news is we'd be picking up right where we left off in European competitions. So.
yeah, but like I don't know, man. Like Liverpool, Arsenal, Tottenham, Milan, Inter.
Oh, I didn't count the Italian teams.
So Milan, Inter, Chelsea.
Yeah.
Like
I keep forgetting about the Milan clubs. We'd probably be on par with AC Milan, and then Murda would be somewhere near us. I don't think they can compete with a lot of the bigger clubs in the world.
well, that's the thing is like they just did sweet fuck all in their Champions League group there. So it's like maybe we'd be better than them in that Super League. So yeah, I don't know. But Chelsea did also beat Porto, and we didn't. So
yeah,
that kind of
a very underrated coach. So I can't really. I want to be like, oh yeah, we're better than Chelsea, but
yeah. We also allowed 3 garbage goals out of the 4 Porto scored. Like, fuck me.
I gotta say, I was very happy to see that they said no to that invitation. I was just like, we can't get away from this damn team. like,
Oh man, yeah, it's gonna be very very interesting times. The only thing I can continue to stress to everybody is buckle up. It's gonna be a wild, bumpy ride.
Yeah.
We'll see what ends up happening, but I think there can be some good out of this. I think there can be some good out of this. It's just change in general. Like you have 3 different types of people when it comes to change. You have those that go with it, that ride it out, that just adapt and go with the flow immediately. You have the ones that are on the extreme opposite end that resist with everything they have. And then you have those ones that are kind of like, I'm still a little curious. They're on the fence and they just kind of wait a bit. And I'd have to say, I'm kind of on that. Let's wait a bit. Let's find out a little more. But I'm more leaning towards I can get behind this because I'm thinking long term and the potential that it has in comparison to Champions League and just. UEFA's done it to themselves. I really can't stress enough how much I could care less about UEFA and FIFA. Why is nobody talking? Absolutely nobody talking about the people dying, trying to set up for this fucking Qatar thing.
Awful.
Like What's the number? 6,500 or something?
Yeah.
Like, why is this not being talked about?
The
You know?
E60 documentary on it's appalling. It's interesting, but it's appalling. You like anyone who hasn't watched that should watch it because it really goes into depth to the crime that was that World Cup build. It's it you cannot justify UEFA and FIFA in any way possible. And it's just a long list of crimes that they've done in the past and now.
Yeah. I can't stress enough too, like if you haven't like just run a search like Lewis said at the very start of this thing. Run a search and look into it. Absolutely wild. Absolutely wild the stuff that you'll see. So it's our club. Like you support Juventus, you're a Juventus supporter. You should want them to keep the money in house because it should, in theory, better them. You know, and let's see what happens. Let's see what happens when the dust settles because there's still a lot of questions to be answered. And I'm sure we're, like I said, buckle up. Tomorrow's the next Serie A league meeting. Let's see what happens. The next day we have a match against Parma, potentially.
Yeah.
Kick us out. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But it's going to be interesting to say the least. And again, I thank you all for joining. Thank you, everybody, for all the support. Lewis, man, I know it's super late there. We're going to wrap this up now. Thank you again for doing it. I love these pop-ups. A lot of fun. By all means, please, again, like the video. Subscribe if you haven't already. And we got a lot of cool stuff. Match day lives. As long as there's a match on Wednesday, we'll have one. And then a post-match podcast after that. I think we'll have a live watch-along coming up in the next little bit. So keep an eye out for that. And if you're tired of the shit commentators, come watch us have a couple of beers and have some fun, watch a game with us. But until next time, as always, regardless of its Super League, Serie A, Serie B, whatever, it's always Forza Juve, fino alla fine. And my man rocking the Il Fenomeno Vero from Striped Hearts Apparel. Guys, check out Striped Hearts Apparel. Awesome, cool gear for Juventini.
Right below me.
Cool gear for Azzurri fans as well. New drop. Check it out. And it all helps support the pod, and proceeds go to charity. Good night, everybody. Take care. Forza Juve. Fino alla fine. Ciao.